Today it's a live session, so I've got one of my art groups here with me, so if you hear any coughs or splutters in the background, then you'll know where they're coming from. So today I'm going to do a very simple sand dune scene with the sea, and I've drawn a horizon across which is a third of the way down from the top, and I've just got this this sort of hump of sand here where the marram grass is going to be coming down across here, and then I've just pre-drawn 3 waves, which are these sort of long sort of taper to the edges and then rise and then taper off again on there, and that's all I'm going to draw. So I'm going to get straight into doing the sky. So I'm going to keep the sky pretty straightforward. I've got some cerulean blue and some ultramarine blue on the palette. I'm just going to use these 2 colours. So I'm going to use the mini hake brush. This is the small goat hair brush, and I'm just going to fill the brush up with water and then sweep it across the area of the sky, making sure I get water below the horizon. This is Bockingford paper, by the way. This is just a small piece, which is about 7.5 inches by 11, and this is the cold pressed or the knot surface. So I'm literally just going to pick up a little bit of both colours. There's the cerulean. I'm just going to pick up a little of that, and I'm just going to sweep that across the bottom. I'm going to try and leave a few white patches in the area of the sky to represent cloud. A little bit stronger than that. There we go. So that's the cerulean. That's the sort of colour of the sky nearer the horizon, and I'm going to introduce just a little bit of ultramarine higher up where the sky colour is a little bit more intense. But again, as I said, leaving those white patches. A little hair there, let's get rid of that, and that'll do. I'm not really after a spectacular sky, something nice and straightforward like that. And then I'm going to dry that off, and then we'll continue with the painting. So I'm going to paint the sea, and I'm going to create a sort of turquoise colour. So I've got some cerulean here from when I painted the sky. I'm just going to get some of that and sort of just bring that over here, and then I'm going to add a very small amount, get some water in it first, and then I'm going to add a very small amount of lemon yellow. If you overdo it, it'll just turn into a really bright emerald green, so we don't want much. It's just a very small touch, and you'll get a gorgeous turquoise colour like that. And then just next to it there I've got some ultramarine, which I'm just going to wet, and I want a colour now that I can use to create some shadows in the water. So that's the ultramarine with a little bit of water added to it, and then I'm going to use some of the burnt umber that I had earlier and just put a little burnt umber in it, and it'll just turn that blue into a sort of dark gunmetal blue colour. And that looks quite strong. It almost looks black on the palette, but it will, I promise you, it will do the job. So all I'm going to do now is just put the sea on. So I'm going to fill my number 6 spearhead, that's this one here, and I'm just going to run that all the way along. I'm going over the sand dune because I'll be able to remove that paint afterwards. So I'm just going to quickly whip the brush across there, look, pull all that paint across the horizon. Just get a little bit more paint into the brush, and I'm going to whip across again. And if you can leave a few little white spaces in it, it'll just look like there's waves turning out to sea. And then I'm just going to carefully go over the top of that drawn wave with some paint. And I'm going to come underneath the wave as well. Now what I'm going to do is just going to put a little bit of that gunmetal colour into that upper sea before it dries. I can continue the sea shortly. Just a little touch of the brush, and I just want to drag it across like this, and it'll just sort of blend it out, and it will just give another dimension to the colour of the sea. Like that. So it just looks like a variation in the colour of the sea. Right, let me just continue. So I've just washed that, and I'll just go back to my cerulean blue, and I'm going to keep that going because I'm not going to touch that top bit now. Don't want to go back to it. I'm going to carefully again go over the top of this one. The quicker you can get this in, the better if you're trying this. My art group very quiet today. I haven't heard a sound. Oh, there we are. They are still here. Right, so I fill that up with cerulean blue. Now I want to create some shadows under these waves. So that's why this gunmetal colour that you mix needs to be pretty strong, not too runny. So here we are. I'm just going to whip that now on the underside of that wave. It's quite strong. And what it does is it puts a shadow under the wave. Because when a wave rises and turns, it will create a shadow underneath it. So it just makes that look a little bit more genuine, a little bit more natural. Now I'm going to try one last trick. So while this paint is still damp, I'm going to put a little bit of water back into the wave, and I'm only going to use a little number 2 round brush with some clean water. Let me just do it on this lower one here. Got a bit more room. I'm going to put some water into the wave, and I'm just going to catch it so that it bleeds into the damp paint above, and I'm hoping the water will kind of rise and create a little watermark. So it'll look like the sort of foamy top of a wave. There we are. It'll take a while to develop. So I don't know whether you can see, but that's actually starting to create a sort of hazy top as the water sort of creeps into that cerulean blue above. And once it's dried, I'll be able to erase that pencil line, and it will hopefully look like a rising wave. If I can, I'm going to try and remove the pencil now that's on the wave. And that now looks like there's a spray coming up off the top of that wave. A little bit of watercolour magic. Get my 1/4 inch flat brush with some water in it, and because this is Bockingford paper, it allows me just to scrub and touch that paint off that's overlapped my sand dune. Little scrub with some water like that and a touch with some kitchen towel, and as you can see, it takes all the paint away. So this foreground area now, with the sand dune and the beach in the foreground, is going to be done pretty quickly and pretty impressionistically. So I've got some raw sienna here, and I've got a little bit of burnt sienna. I'm just going to put an underwash on it first with the mini hake again. Same brush I used for the sky. So if I just wet it, just flick a bit of water across here first, just to get a little bit of water onto the paper. And then I'm going to pick up some raw sienna and just sweep that down across the whole area of the beach. A little bit more, and then I'm just going to pick up a tiny bit of the burnt sienna as well. Just a little bit. And what I'm going to do with that is sort of sweep it in gently to create a few sort of horizontal bands of blended paint. Has to go in while that raw sienna's wet, otherwise you're going to get really hard stripes. So I'm now going to finish off the whole foreground area. I'm just going to mix various colours on the palette and get those ready. I'm going to use one of these, which is the scimitar brush. You may know it as a sword or a sword liner, and this one of mine's got a much longer handle. I'm going to use this to paint the marram grass. I've got a number 8 brush here, the spearhead, and let me just quickly show you the palette that I've got ready. So I've got some lemon yellow and added a little bit of ultramarine to create a nice vibrant green. There's some burnt umber here, some burnt sienna, raw sienna from earlier, and then here I've got a really strong mix of, I know it looks quite black on the screen there, but it's ultramarine and burnt umber, which gives you a really dark chocolate brown colour, and that's quite strong because I need some dark tones. So I'm going to give this a go. Might all be a little bit hit and miss, but I'm going to try it because I'm going to try and do this really impressionistically. So I'm going to start with the green. So I've got my number 8, filling that up with green, and I'm just going to scribble a load of green paint around here on the top of this hump of sand, and then I'm going to do another scribble of it down here and that's going to come all the way down and sort of taper off onto the beach down here. So the idea is if I get this on in a plentiful enough quantity like this, it will remain wet. Okay, now I'm going to just get a little bit of burnt sienna and just blend that in. Now the scimitar brush, I'm going to start flicking some marram grass with this now. So I'm going to wet that and I'm going to fill it up with the green to start with, and then just start flicking upwards like this from the wet green that's already there. I'll put a little bit down here as well, but this isn't going to look right until I get some really dark tones into this. Right, so I'm going to plunge into the dark paint now and start getting some really dark tones in it. So this is quite an impressionistic way to paint. Just sort of scribbling the tip of the brush around and then again just drawing that paint up like this. And down here as well. I think that looks pretty good at the moment. We've got that sort of area of marram grass there, and then literally I'm going to just get go back to my number 8 if I can find it. Here we are. I'm going to give that a wash, and I'm going to just start drifting in some sort of movement and shape of some other colours over the top of this. Let's start with a little bit of burnt sienna, really pale in the brush. Drag a little bit of this down. Using the side of the brush, perhaps it just gives a little tone and a texture in the foreground. We'll sweep across there. Let's use a little bit of burnt umber as well. And you can see immediately the sort of shape and form of the sand there. I'm going to put a little bit of the turquoise in. Just pull that across, almost as if there's a little bit of damp or a little puddle of water in here somewhere. And then of course, once I've done that, I'm just going to finish off with a rigger, and I'm going to get some of that dark chocolate colour and start just faffing. Now then, if you're from Yorkshire, you might know what faffing is, and it just means scribbling and playing around with the brush. Let's put a few little stones and things down here. Just scribbling with the end of the brush. We'll probably need a few in this background as well. In fact, we could have a little bit of that coming down into the sea just there. A few little rocks. And it just represents this sort of impression of what you see in and around the coast. So I can obviously spend a little bit of time putting a few more little stones and bits and pieces on the beach. Okay, that's dried off now, and I'm just going to put one or two last finishing touches on. So I'm just going to use the rigger and just keep putting these random little marks on the sand, which looks a little bit like pebbles, little squiggles of seaweed or something along those lines. I'm also going to use the scimitar again, just fill it up with that really dark brown. I'm going to put a few additional wisps on here, just coming out from various different positions. This will now lay nicely over the top of the lighter paint underneath, and a few more just down here in the foreground as well. Not too many, because I don't want to completely overdo that, but it just adds another little dimension to the painting. There, we'll just diminish those bits of marram grass down there. So I think that's it. I've put a couple of birds on there, and don't really want to do much more to that. I hope you've had fun watching that, and that you have a successful time if you try it. Please don't forget to subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you on another video.